3. navbatdagi 2009 yılı mayda Amerika'nın paytaxtı Washington'da, 4. navbatdagi 2012 yılı mayda Yaponiyanın paytaxtı Tokyo'da, 5. navbatdagi 2016 yılı iyulda Fransa'nın paytaxtı Paris'da, 6. navbatdagi 2017 yılı noyabrda München'da, 7. navbatdagi bo'lsa 2021 yılı noyabrda Chexiya'nın paytaxtı Praga'da o'tkazildi. Erkin Altıgin efendim 1. navbatlik qurultayning raisligiga, Rabia Qadir xonim 2., 3., 4. ve 5. navbatlik qurultayning raisligiga, Толқын Иса efendim 6. ve 7. navbatlik qurultay raisligiga saylandi. Yılı Dünya Uyg'ur qurultayı qurulganda Xitoy mustamlikasidagi Sharq Turkistonda va u yerda yurgizilayotgan shiddatli milliy zulmni va Uyg'ur millatini dunyoda qancha bilib ketmaydi. Şuna qurultay Uyg'ur masalasini xalqaralashtirishni o'zining eng muhim va ta'xirsiz strategik nishon qilib bekitgan edi. Qurultay bu maqsadni amalga oshirish uchun ayni chog'dagi intayin chekli imkonlarga qaramasdan xuddi yangi bilan quduq qazgandek tinimsiz tirishchiliklarni ko'rsatdi. Uning dastlabki namoyandasi ko'p xil tilda turbatlarga ichib, uning da Sharq Turkistonni, jumladan Uyg'urlar boshdan kechirayotgan og'ir vaziyatlarni dunyo jamoatchiligiga bildirishga boshladi. İctimai tarafı vositalarının meydan kelişi bilen bu sohadagi xizmatlarni texmi jonlantirdi. Yana bir tarafdan dunyodagi ta'sir kuchli kishilik huquq tashkilotlari bilan izchil aloqa qilishni kuchaytirdi. Buning natijasida Birleşken Milletler Teşkilatı, Avrupa İttifaqı qatorli xalqaro organlarning, shundoqla Amerika boshchiligidagi G'arb demokratik ellarning hukumat va parlamentlarining eshiklari bir-birlab ochilishga boshladi. 2004 yildan hozirgacha Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultayı BDT'da, Avrupa parlamenti va har qaysi davlatlarning parlamentlarida har xil temadagi yig'in va faoliyatlarni o'tkazdi.
In recent visit to Europe, Xi Jinping repeated that counter-terrorism policy a long-term plan.
Please stop. We have another point of order from China. Please continue. Try.
副主席先生，该非政府组织。
Açılgan köp qatımlıq yığınlarda Xitay dairələrinin hər tərəfli qarşılığı və tosqunluqları qarmasından muvaffaqiyətli halda Uyğur məsələsini kəm köləmlik anlattı. Avrupa İttifaqı, Amerika, Kanada, Yaponiya, Angliya, Fransiya, Germaniya, Tayvan qatorliq davlatlarning parlamentlarida Uyğur dostluq guruhlarini muvaffaqiyatli qurib chiqdi. Avrupa İttifaqının mərkəzi bir yılda Londonda, Berlinda və İstanbulda məxsus işxana təsis qilib, Uyğur davasının xalqaralashishini tixim sistemlashtirdi. 2013 yılı Xitayda bo'libmi Xi Jinping hokimiyat beshiga chiqqandan keyin Sharq Turkistondagi vaziyat favqulodda yomonlashishga boshladi. İlgari davom qilib kelayotgan milliy kamsitish va assimilyatsiya qatorliq zulm siyosati endilikda irqiy qirg'inchilik va insoniyat qarshi jinoyatga qarab taraqqiy qildi. 2016 yılının keyingi yarmidan boshlab Uyg'urlarni kam ko'lamda tutqun qilib jazolarga qamash boshlandi. 2017 yılının oxirigacha jazolarga qamalgan Uyg'urlarning 1 milliondan oshib ketganligi ve tutqunning davom qilayotganligi haqidagi qo'rqinchli reallik tag'i yangi 6. navbatlik qurultayni chaqirib, yangi bir navbatlik rahbarlik heyetini saylab chiqqan Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultayı yangi bir krizis hamda intayin og'ir bir sinoqqa duch keldi. Chunki Uyg'ur millati tarixda misli ko'rilmagan bir qirg'inchilikqa, millat bo'yicha yo'qotilish xavfiga duchor bo'lmoqda edi. Afsuski, dunyo jamoati bunday bir qirg'inchilikning rostdan yuz berayotganiga ishonmayotdi. Muşundaq bir paytda qurultay jiddiy tadbir elib, 2018 yılı aprel ayida Bryusselda 5000 kishilik va yana shu yili noyabrda Jenevada 3000 kishilik cho'ng namoyishlarni uyushtirdi. Bu orqali BDT, Avrupa İttifaqı, jumladan dunyo matbuotining Uyg'ur irqi qirg'inchiligiga diqqat og'dirishiga turtki bo'ldi. Shuning bilan birga Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultayı Norvegiya Uyg'ur komiteti bilan birlikda vatanimizda yuz berayotgan irqiy qirg'inchilikqa oid faktlik materiallarni tutqun qilinganlarning tizimini tayyorlab, 2018 yil aprelda avval Avrupa İttifaqı komissiyoniga va BDT kishilik huquq kengashiga sundi. Xalqaro kishilik huquq tashkilotlari va qurultayning tirishchiliklari natijasida 2018 yil avgustda BDT irqiy ayrimchilikni amaldan qoldirish komitetining yig'inida komitetning muavin raisi Makdogil xonim boshchiligidagi komitet a'zolari tunji qatam 1 milliondan ortiq Uyg'urlarni asos qilgan Turkiy millatlarning jazolarga qamalganligiga doir ko'p tarafli dalillarga erishganligini butun dunyoga jakarladi. Shuningdek keyin vaziyatda tubdan o'zgarish bo'ldi. Sharq Turkistondagi jazo lagerlari va u yerda yuz berayotgan vahshiyliklar xalqaroning diqqat nazariga sazovor bo'ldi. BDTda jazo lagerlari masalasida Xitoyni qo'llaydigan davlatlar va Xitoyni ayblaydigan davlatlar bo'lib ikki safga ayrildi va keskin munozaralar olib berildi. Dünya Uyg'ur qurultiyi ikkinchi qadamda har qaysi davlatlardagi Uyg'ur tashkilotlari va xalqaro tashkilotlar bilan yaqindan hamkorlashib, Uyg'ur irqiy qirg'inchiligini BDTda, Yevropa parlamentida va har qaysi davlatlarning hukumat va parlamentlarida rasmiy e'tirof qilishini qo'lga keltirish uchun harakatga o'tdi. Amerika hukumati Xitoyning Uyg'urlarga o'tkazayotgan vahshiyliklarni dunyoda tunji bo'lib rasmiy yo'sinda irqiy qirg'inchilik va insoniyat qarshi jinoyat deb jakarlagan, shuningdek Uyg'ur kishilik huquq siyosiy qonunni rasmiy ma'qullagan Uyg'urlar haqidagi tunji qatim qonun chiqargan davlat bo'lish bilan tarixiy ahamiyatga ega sayt ochdi. Bu ishlarning ro'yobga chiqishida Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyi tarkibida faoliyat olib berayotgan Uyg'ur kishilik huquq qurilishi, Uyg'ur harakati tashkiloti, Amerika Uyg'ur jamiyati, Amerikadagi lager shohidlari va boshqa vatanparvar qarindoshlarimizning ko'rsatgan tirishchanligi favqulodda zo'r bo'ldi. Tunji qatim 2021 yil fevralda Kanada parlamenti Uyg'ur irqiy qirg'inchilik qarorini qabul qildi va undan keyin 10 davlat parlamenti va Yevropa parlamenti Xitoy hukumatining Uyg'urlarga qarshi olib berayotgan qirg'inchilikni irqiy qirg'inchilik va insoniyat qarshi jinoyat deb e'tirof qildi. 2022 yil avgustda BDT kishilik huquq oliy komissarligi bu haqda maxsus doklad e'lon qildi. Dünya Uyg'ur qurultiyi Uyg'ur irqiy qirg'inchilikni to'sishni qonun asosiga qilish va bu orqali texim ko'p davlat hukumatlari va parlamentlarning e'tirof qilishini qo'lga keltirish uchun qilgan texim zo'r bir ish bo'lsa, 2020 yil sentyabrda Angliyalik mashhur sudya Jeffrey Nice akanning yetakchiligidagi London Uyg'ur sudini qurib chiqishi bo'ldi va shuni loyiq ravishda 18 oydan ko'proq jiddiy tayyorlik xizmatlari natijasida 2021 yil iyun, sentyabr va noyabr oylarida 3 qatimliq guvohlik almash sudini o'ngishli ochdi.
Judgment of the Uyghur Tribunal, the People's Tribunal, formed to consider allegations that the People's Republic of China, PRC, has committed genocide against crimes against humanity and torture against Uyghur, Kazakh and other.
2021 yil 9 dekabr Uyg'ur sud kollegiyasi Londonda hukm e'lon qilish yig'ini chaqirib, Xitoy hukumatining Uyg'urlarga yurgizayotgan irqiy qirg'inchilik va insoniyat qarshi jinoyatdir deb hukm chiqardi. Qurultay raisi Dolqin Iso afandim naq maydondan videolik nutq so'zlab 9 dekabrning Uyg'ur irqiy qirg'inchilik kuni qilib bekitilganligini jakarladi.
There is no more excuse for the state and the global community to stay silent on this genocide. Now we declare each year on December 9, we commemorate International Day of the commemoration of the victim of Uyghur genocide.
2017 yil jazo lagerlari dunyoga oshkor bo'lgandan tortib, buni dunyoga fosh qilish, har qaysi davlatlarning parlament va hukumatlarida uni e'tirof qildirish, Amerikada Uyg'ur siyosiy qonun loyihasining ma'qullanishini qo'lga keltirish va oxirida Uyg'ur sudining qaror chiquvchi bo'lgan bir qancha yillar Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyi rahbarlari intayin zo'r kuch sarf qildi. Qahramon lager shohidlari boshchiligidagi shohidlarning bergan guvohliklari alayda rol o'ynadi. Bundan boshqa Amerika, Kanada, Angliya, Belgiya, Fransiya va Gollandiya qatorliq davlatlarda turishliq Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyining rahbarlari, Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyi qarashliq yerlik tashkilotlar va siyosiy faoliyatchilarimiz o'zlari turishliq davlatlarning parlament va hukumatlarida Uyg'ur irqiy qirg'inchiligini e'tirof qildirish uchun zo'r tirishchiliklarni ko'rsatdi. Uyg'ur sudining o'ngishli ichilishi uchun Uyg'ur akademiyasidagi ziyolilarimiz material to'plash va tarjima qilishlar uchun ko'p fidokorlik ko'rsatdi. Muhaciratdagi ko'pligan vatanparvar qarindoshlarimiz hamda bir qism boylarimizning moddiy yordam bilan Uyg'ur sudi iqtisod kafolatiga ega qilindi. Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyining yana bir muhim xizmati bo'lsa, Uyg'ur kishilik huquq qurilishi bilan birlikda Shi Jinping boshchiligidagi kommunist Xitoy amaldorlarini Uyg'urlarga qarshi irqiy qirg'inchilik va insoniyat qarshi jinoyat sodir qilganligi bilan ayblab, 2022 yil yanvarda Argentina sudiga rasmiy arz qilish bo'ldi. Navbatda bu da'vo jiddiy davom qilmoqda. Xitoy hokimiyatining xalqimiz ustidan yurgizayotgan jinoyatlardan yana biri jazo lagerlari va bu lagerlarda shundoqla Xitoy o'lkalariga o'tkazib ketilib, zavod fabrikalarda qul o'rinda ishlatilayotgan va ularning qon tarbiyaligi bitgan tovarlarni chet el bozorlariga to'kma qilib monopol xarakterli foydalanishdan iborat edi. Dunyo Uyg'ur qurultiyi har qaysi davlatlarda Uyg'ur majburiy emgak orqali ishlangan mahsulotlarni import qilish va sotishni cheklash, shuningdek chet ishlik shirkatlarni shu davlatlarning qonun organlariga arz qilishdek bir qator unumli xizmatlarni qildi. Bunun tipik misali Germaniyanın Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz ve BMW qatarlıq dünyada tanınmış 3 avtomobil şirketi üstüden Germaniya Federatsiya İqtisad ve Eksport Kontrol İdaresi sunulgan əriz. Qurultay tərkibidəki Kanada Uyğur Haqlarını Qoğdaş Quruluş başçılığında Kanadadakı 28 kişilik hüquq təşkilatı və advokatlar cəmiyyəti Kanadadakı Uyğur məcbur əmgək çetişlik bolğan 14 Kanada şirketi üstüdən münasibətli orunlarga sunulgan əriz. Onundan başqa 2020 yılı maydan başlap Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı və onun tərkibidəki təşkilatlardan Uyğur Kişilik Hüquq Quruluşu, Amerika Uyğur Birləşmesi və Uyğur Hərəkət Təşkilatı qatarlıq Uyğur təşkilatlarının səfərbər qilishi bilan xalqaralıq məcbur əmgəkni to'xtatish hamkorlik minbari qurilib, birlik faoliyat olib berishga boshladi. Bu hamkorlik minbarining tarkibida 70 Uyğur təşkilatının o'z ichiga olgan 260 dan ortiq təşkilat birlikdə dunyo miqyosida Sharq Turkistondagi qulaylikni oxirlashtirish harakatini qanot yaydirib kelmoqda. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı Uyğur məcbur əmgək çetişlik paxta mahsulotlarının Angliyaga eksport qilinishiga yo'l qo'yilganlik munosabati bilan 2020 yılı 23 aprelda Angliyadagi Dünya qonun harakatlari to'g'ri qonunchilik markazining vakolatchi qilib, Angliya Oliy sud mahkamasiga Angliya Tamojna idorasi va Angliya Ichki ishlar ministrligi ustidan ariz sundi. Bu ariz hali davom qilmoqda. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı qurilgan kunidan e'tiboran vatandan hijrat qilib chiqqan qarindoshlarning siyosiy panohlik ishlariga yordam berish, tamojnalarda to'xtalib Xitoy qaytarilishga duch kelganlarni qutuldirish vazifasini o'tkazib kelmoqda. 2019 yilning oxirida Xitoydan tarqalgan vabo mezgilida Turkiya qatorliq bir qism davlatlarda turayotgan Sharq Turkistonlik musofirlar intayin qiyin ahvolda qoldi. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı darhol harakatga kelib, Türkiye'deki Ma'rif ve Hemkarlık Teşkilatı, Şark Türkistan Ölümalar Birliği, Uyghur Akademisi ve Şark Türkistan Vahbis Qatarlıq Teşkilatlarında müzakirleşip, 2020 yılı April'da Şark Türkistan Ciddi Yardım Merkezi namasında vaqtli yardım merkezi kurup çıktı. Bu merkez dünyanın her qaysi joylaridagi Uyg'urlar arasida iyani yig'ish to'lqini qo'zg'ab, bir oyga yetmagan qisqagina vaqt ichida naq 220 ming Amerika dollari to'plab, ig'ir iqtisodiy qiyinchilikda qolgan qarindoshlarimizning darmon bo'ldi. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı'nın teşebbüsü ve qo'llashi bilan Kanada Sharq Turkiston jamiyati va Kanadadagi qarindoshlarimizning safarbar bo'lishi, shundaqla Kanada Uyğur haqlarini qo'llash tashkilotining mas'uli Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı Qonun komitetining mudiri Mehmet To'xtay efendimning bir qanchalik tirishchiliklari natijasida Kanadaga 10 ming Uyğur musofirni yerlashtirish programmasi 2023 yılı 1 fevral Kanada parlamentida rasmiy ma'qullanib, ijro qilinish bosqichiga o'tdi. Bu Uyg'urlarning muhojirat tarixida g'oyat zo'r voqea va olamshumul buyuk bir natijadir. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı muhojiratlik xalqimizni va tashkilotlarimizni o'rtaq milliy manfaat va g'oya ostida bir yerga jam qilish, o'zaro fikr almashtirish, vatan millatning taqdiri ustida tang bosh qotirish va bu orqali millatni to'g'ri va sog'lom bo'lgan siyosiy davrga yetaklash uchun nurg'un unumli xizmatlarni qildi. Mushu maqsadda 2011 yılı mayda Amerikaning Washington shahrida tunji qatimliq Sharq Turkiston Oliy Kengashini chaqirdi. 2018 yılı noyabr ve 2022 yılı mayda Germaniyaning München shahrida Milliy Kengash, 2022 yılı noyabrda Yevropa parlamentida, 2023 yılı oktyabrda Yaponiya parlamentida xalqaro Uyghur minbar qatorliq yuqori darajali xalqaro yig'in va seminariyalarni uyushtirib, vatan millatning taqdiri ustida ko'p tarafli muzokaralar olib borgandan boshqa muhim loyihalar tuzib chiqildi va jiddiy qarorlar chiqardi. Buningdan boshqa Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı davoning yosh izbosarlarini tarbiyalashga alohida ahamiyat berdi. Hozirgacha dunyoning har qaysi joylarida jami 20 qatimdan ortiq yoshlarni tarbiyalash kurslarini ochdi. Bu kurslarda tajribali siyosiy arboblar va to'nilgan kishilik huquq faoliyatchilari turli temalar bo'yicha leksiyalar berib, yoshlarimizning xalqaro vaziyat, siyosat, tashkilotchilik va kishilik huquq xizmati haqidagi qimmatli ma'lumotlar bilan ta'minlab, bir turkum yosh faoliyatchilarning yetishib chiqishiga turtki bo'ldi. Dünya Uyğur Qurultayı bir turkum vatanparvar qarindoshlarimizning muqaddas vatanimizning hurlik va mustaqilligini qo'lga keltirishdan iborat buyuk g'oyasining turkisida qurilgan edi. Yangi qurilganda ne yeterlik maddi kuchi, ne odam kuchi bor edi. Ammo ular kuchni, ilhomni vatan va millat bo'lgan kuchlik sevgidan oladi. Ularning eng cho'ng boylik bo'lsa, xolis, minnatsiz qilingan fidokorliklar edi. Mana oradan 20 yil o'tdi. Hesapsız ecir, mehnat ve fidakarlık meyve verdi. mana bugun xalqaro sahnalarda g'oyat zo'r ta'sir kuchi bor bir tashkilotga aylandi. Uning qilgan xizmatlari xalqaro organlarning va davlatlarning muayyanlashtirishiga erishdi. Bunun tipik misali xalqaro soqchi tashkiloti, ya'ni Interpol tarafidan 2018 yili chiqarilgan Dolqin hisobatning ustidan 21 yil davom qilgan xalqaro tutish buyrug'ining amaldan qoldirilishi ve Sharq Turkistan İslam Partisi 2020 yılı Amerika'nın terörist teşkilat tizimlikinden çıkarıp edilişi. Şundaqla Dünya qurultayı rehberlerinin Halifax Xalqaro bexatarlik munbiri ve München Xavfsizlik Kengashi qatorli xalqaro bexatarlik yig'inlariga taklif bilan qatnashib, davlat arboblari, siyosiyonlar, generallar ve ta'siri zo'r xalqaro tashkilotlarning muhim zotlari bilan dunyo bexatarligi, tinchligi ve demokratiya masalalarini birlikda muzokara qilgudek maqomga yetganligi qatorliqlardir. Shundaqla yana 2019 yili davlatlik yig'in zalida davlatlik marosim bilan Amerika demokratiyani ilgari surish fondi, ya'ni NED tarafidan Dünya demokratiya mukofotiga nail bo'lishi 2023 ve 2024 yılı Uda 2 navbat Nobel tinchlik mukofotining laureati sharafiga muyassar bo'lishi, Dünya qurultiyining sobiq raisi Robiya Qodir xonimning 2005 yildan e'tiboran bir qancha qatim Nobel tinchlik mukofotining laureati bo'lishi va 2015 yili Amerikada Tom Lantis kishilik huquq mukofotiga erishishi, qurultayning navbatdagi raisi Dolqin hisobatning 2016 yili martda Amerikadagi kommunizm qurbonlari xotira fondi tarafidan kishilik huquq mukofotiga sazovor bo'lishi, Uyghur Hareket Teşkilatı'nın reisi Roşan Abbas Hanım'ın 2019 yılı erkinlik jangchisi mukofotiga erişişi, Qurultay Xalqaro ishlar direktori, Ayollar komitetining mudiri Zumratay Erkin xalqaro sahnalardagi ko'rinarli muvaffaqiyatlar bilan 2024 yilda Amerika Roosevelt erkinlik mukofotiga erishish qatorliq odamshumul natijalar Dunyo qurultayining qanchalarni tanqilganligining Vatanim, milletim deb tinimsiz soqqan o'tqashdek yuraklarning mislsiz qon ta'rining samarasidi. Qurultayimiz yangi qurilganda muqimishxonasi yo'q, partizansk ahvoldan kechini kunduz bo'lib jon tikib tirishchilik ko'rsatish natijasida bugungidek Myunxenda markaziy ishxonasi bo'lgandan sir Berlinda, Londonda, İstanbulda, Bryusselda qarmoq ishxonalar bo'lgan sistemalar funksiyal bir organga aylandi. 2024 yili martdan boshlab qurultay o'zining muqim mulki bo'lgan yangi xizmat binosida ish boshlash shartiga nail bo'ldi. Biz bu munosabat bilan bu markazning vujudga chiqishi uchun moddiy jihatdan yordam qilgan dunyoning har qaysi joylaridagi butkul vatandoshlarimizga yana bir qatim minnatdorligimizni bildiramiz.
Bugün bu bayraklarımız Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'nın kurucularında altında. Ama körüntüsü altımızda 200 yıl artık devletlerin bayrakları var. Ve sunum işimiz Muşu iradı bunlardan olsa, her türlüdeki Muşu Hristiyanlık bunlardan olsa, bu bayrak bugün bu Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'nın sırtını yapmasa, çok mutluyum. Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'nın içine aşırı bayraklı tadardı orada oldu. Bu öğretimiz. Sayın İzler, biz bölgecemez, biz teröristlemez. Çünkü Şanghay'da, Beijing'de, Stalin'in koyduğunda hepsimiz gibi de o. Önümüzden uzaktan vatanımızdaki ilgilik, hukukumuzu kollarımızda vakimiz. Bu bölgecemez, bu sevgi ve en önemli Şark Türkistan tanıdığın hak hukuku.
I have never felt so inspired. Acayip hayacanlı yaptıklarımız. I want to thank our dedicated World of E-Congress Duk TV team and everyone who helped to make this project possible. Bizning Duk TV ve müşnunga septe katkan hemme septaşlarımızga köp rahmet etimiz. Now it is my immense pleasure to invite Dr. Jiwei Shi, the Taiwanese ambassador to Germany, for his opening remarks.
it's quite difficult to stay calm after you have watched the long journey of the Uyghur from 1949 until today. I can still recall the last sentence was, the Uyghur, they are not asking for separation because you're not asking that Shanghai or Beijing should be separated from China. You know, I think that you don't have to ask for separation because if you're not married, you can be divorced. Dear President Dogon Isa, an old friend of mine, although we haven't met for quite a long time, though not very often. And dear Executive Director Kanat, dear friends, dear Uyghurs from all over the world, dear friends from Tibet, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from all over the world, standing here as the representative of Taiwan in Germany, I'm very much honored as well as pleased to be one of the persons who have been given the privilege and the honor to deliver an opening remark at this significant event, namely the World Uyghur Congress, the 20th year anniversary. I would like to start with a Taiwanese word which played an important role in my childhood, characterized through poverty. This Taiwanese word is pan, meaning bread in English, in German, das Brot. This word in Taiwanese, pan, originated doubtlessly from the French word, le pain. The Japanese Empire, which covered Taiwan from 1895 to 1948 until the end of the Second World War. The Japanese Empire introduced this French word into the Taiwanese. As a child, I used to use this word pan, and I thought it's Taiwanese. I didn't know that this Taiwanese word pan was actually a loan word out of the French. Several decades later, I was no more a child. I found out by coincidence that this word in Taiwanese pan is also hiding in the concept company, meaning originally someone with whom you share your last piece of bread on the way, on its own journey, or even in a battle fighting for your freedom and for your democracy. That means you watch my back, I watch your back, protecting each other against the enemy who tries or tries to hurt us, and in this case, that's the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And that's why I'm standing here today to support that the purpose of the establishment of the World Uyghur Congress 20 years ago, namely to promote democracy, human rights, and freedom for the Uyghur people. Because these are universal values which bring us together, not only here, not only today, but forever all over the world. That Uyghur, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and Taiwanese, as well as all the friends showing solidarity to us from all over the world. The French word for bread is le pain. But pain, P-A-I-N, means in English suffering. In this case, it's rather a coincidence, but the word pain would be das Elend in Germany, and Elend means suffering. But this word deserves our attention because the word Elend in Germany means etymologically exile in a foreign land, Elend, exile in a foreign land. And this is exactly the fate that has befallen thousands and thousands Uyghurs years after years. And now we have to ask the following question. Why are so many Uyghurs living abroad? Here in Munich, for example, why is Xinjiang or East Turkistan controlled and governed by China? Why do the Uyghurs need to be put into the so-called re-education camp? If they were Chinese, because they are not Chinese, so they are being re-educated to become a Chinese with violence. And since Xinjiang, that's the Chinese concept for Turkestan, for Xinjiang, since Xinjiang means in Chinese new territory, this land, this beautiful land with wonderful people just cannot have been always a part of China. Not to mention the People's Republic of China. And why did the People's Liberation Army of China have to conquer Tibet militarily in the year 1950 if Tibet has always been a part of China? Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a case of separatism I'm discussing. It's a case of imperialism I'm condemning. My next question is, you know, it's not written in my manuscript. Since 1914, shortly after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, China has used so many military to get Xinjiang, Tibet, later on here and there. That reminds me of a small joke I heard. A man was sitting in a bar, and after a cup of beer, he said to his neighbor, "You know, my dog is very intelligent." And the man said, "Yes, how intelligent?" "Well, my dog brings me every day the newspaper." And they say, "Well, a lot of dogs can do that." "Yes, but I haven't subscribed to any newspaper." The military of China, okay, they are powerful. They bring every day the newspaper to the host. But the host hadn't subscribed any newspaper. So, ladies and gentlemen, my next question is, why were 6 million Hong Kongers given back or handed over to the communist regime of China in the year 1997? Are these 6 million Hong Kongers, are they not human beings? Are there pieces of furniture in the house? Are there merchandise? Taking a glance at what has happened to the Hong Kong since the year 2019. Maybe I should correct myself by comparing the Hong Kong with merchandise. No, they have not become merchandise. They have not been treated like if they were merchandise. No, they have actually been treated as if they were slaves in their own town, in their own house. If we would add up, put it all together, all the evils and crimes committed by the Chinese Communist regime against the Uyghurs, against Tibetans, against Hong Kongers and their own people, the dissidents of China and threatening Taiwanese. If you put all these crimes they have committed in the last decades, then the People's Republic of China should have been expelled from the United Nations long time ago, according to their own charter. The Article 6 of Chapter 2 of the Charter of the United Nations, which goes like this. One member of the United Nations which has persistently violated the principles contained in the present Charter of the United Nations may be expelled from this organization by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. So if we really stick to this charter, of which the United Nations was and are very proud, then again, according to their own regulation, according to their own charter, the People's Republic of China is disqualified, has no disqualification as long as the CCP is governing China. And one of the reasons why CCP is still governing China, governing so many people, is because CCP means not only Chinese Communist Party. CCP means, unfortunately, also China can punish. Well, China is still in the UN, but not Taiwan. Instead, Taiwan, as an admired democracy, has been waiting in vain in the last decades to join the United Nations again. We are not even allowed to take part in the WHA as an observer. I used to say, if China wants to solve the so-called Taiwan question, they have to correct themselves. Because, ladies and gentlemen, Taiwan is not a question. Taiwan is the answer. As a matter of fact, China has been distorting the UN Resolution 2758 to limit Taiwan's access to the United Nations, unfortunately quite successful. Moreover, the communist regime in Peking has repeatedly claimed that China would make no promise to resolve the Taiwan question without resorting to the force. Ladies and gentlemen, this attitude of the CCP, that is one of reasons why we, Taiwanese, Hong Kongese, Tibetan, Uyghur, South Mongolian, all the friends supporting democracy and freedom in the world, that's the reason why we should stick to each other on this journey, because the CCP has proven they are capable of killing people, re-educated people, and threatening people. So, Taiwan has never been a part of People's Republic of China, just as Xinjiang, East Turkistan, and Tibet, we have never been a part of this People's Republic of China established on the 1st October 1949. They call Taiwan a breakaway province of China, and that's ridiculous. You can call Taiwan a province of China, but not a province of China. Ladies and gentlemen, since the outbreak of invasion war of Putin against the Ukraine, the concept Zeitenwende goes viral over the world, especially in the world of freedom. But I would like to point out as a Taiwanese, as a diplomat, that sometimes I'm not a diplomat, I'm a problemate. I would like to point out that Zeitenwende is not only a noun, but also a verb. It means not only the change of time, it should be also a verb. It's time to change. And meanwhile, as I emphasized before, we must stick to each other, leaving no one behind, together with like-minded friends from all over the world, Germany, USA, France, Japan, Canada, UK, and so on. Otherwise, it could very easily happen before we can say Jack Robinson. When we, the Uyghur, the Tibetan, the Hong Kongers, and the Taiwanese, when we add our voices to the chorus expressing my home is my castle, and CCP could say, sorry, your home has been cancelled. Ladies and gentlemen, together we are definitely capable of preventing horrible things like that from becoming reality. I feel so sorry to know that a lot of Uyghurs, Tibetan, Hong Konger, and so on, they are separated from their family. But as long as we know in the deep bottom of our heart that a true love cannot be separated. I used to say, united we stand, divided we fall. And in this case, I know a lot of people are divided from their family. I would say in this case, be strong with your faith to your family, to your friends, to your country, to your relatives. And I would say in this case, united we stand, divided we fall, much more in love with our country, with our homeland, with our families and our brothers and sisters far over there. My warmest congratulations from the bottom of my heart to the 20th birthday of the World Uyghur Congress. Please always keep in mind, you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for these incredibly powerful words, and I think it gave us all the courage to continue this fight. Albay ben deyişini tutatına bu Germaniyanın Tayvan elçisi şuna sözlerine köpünkü rahmet. In case you're wondering what the noise from behind is, it's my colleague interpreting English to Uyghur for our Uyghur guests. Eğer çemiyenler bolsa, arkada kulak kısalığın tercümanlığı var, amığanlar, asanlar bizden tercümanlar tercüme kılatıdı Uygurça'ya. Next, we would like to continue this program with a few video remarks we have received from very dear friends from all around the world. Hem de növbette biz dünyanın her qaysı yerlerden tapşırıp alğan, dostlarımızdan tapşırıp alğan videolarını kısaca tanıştırıp etmek istiyorum.
I'm David Wilson, President and CEO of the National Endowment for Democracy. For 20 years, the World Uyghur Congress has worked tirelessly to advocate for the Uyghur cause. At the beginning, few people around the world knew who the Uyghur people were, much less understood the deep and systemic abuses the Uyghur people faced in the People's Republic of China. Dolkan Issa underscored this in spades during his recent visit to Ned to present his book, The China Freedom Trap, his own story, in which he describes being detained in Switzerland, South Korea, Italy, and even Dulles Airport, to name just a few places. But the abuses, as you know, are far worse. The world knows of them because of the bravery of so many Uyghurs who have been detained, imprisoned, tortured, or sterilized. We know of them because the World Uyghur Congress and your allies have remained determined and resilient. And Ned is proud to have been your partners, there with you from the beginning. Indeed, in my first year at the endowment, I was honored to join a traditional meshrup at Munich to experience how the community maintains and passes on its beautiful traditions, not to mention the cuisine. I've had the honor of seeing how the World Uyghur Congress has undertaken path-breaking human rights advocacy. Your work has been vital to guiding policy, driving media exposure, exposing the Uyghur genocide, and holding China accountable at forums such as the Uyghur Tribunal. Uyghur groups have become more adept to acting on new opportunities by investing in long-term organizational growth, training the next generation of leaders, building long-term resilience, and nurturing strong networks and alliances such as the community we have here with us today. We are honored that Ned has been able to partner with you in this journey of growth. The violations of the rights of the Uyghur community have broader implications for humanity. If democracies are to successfully counter the CCP's expanding anti-democratic influence abroad, we must support efforts to strengthen the resilience of the communities most impacted by China's oppression. Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and Chinese human rights defenders are arguably the communities most consistently resisting the CCP's authoritarianism. We have so much to learn from these frontline communities. So in honoring 20 years of the World Uyghur Congress, we are in awe at how you have put the Uyghur issue at the center of the global conversation about how the CCP wields its power. We will remain strong partners for Uyghurs and others as you struggle for freedom and justice in the years to come. Thank you.
Dear Dork and dear friends, it is a great honor to be with you today, although in a very short way. I will never stop saying and condemning the criminal actions by the Chinese Communist Party carried out in the Xinjiang and in the Turkic region. Only blind eyes could ignore the genocidal nature inherent in Chinese policies against the Uyghurs' identity, the Uyghurs' culture, and their own religion. Forced labor, re-education and internment camps, illegal abduction of people, families, and of children, destruction of mosques, prohibition of expressing one own faith, these are the real face of the regime. The Chinese government does not allow any freedom of association, any protection of workers' rights, and it pretends that workers' union and organizations entirely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party could comply with the ILO rules and obligations. There is no surprise in seeing that China has never ratified Protocol number 29 to the Forced Labor Convention. Another clear evidence of China's total disregard for the rules and norms which constitute the fundamental pillars of the international community. The Chinese Communist Party promotes an ideology aimed at guaranteeing, first and foremost, all workers' rights, when in fact nowadays it is focused on enslaving and exploiting millions and millions of workers, ensuring even higher profits for many of those who are already part of the establishment. The overall conditions for the Uyghurs population is worsened by the regime's denial of freedom of religion. There is no room for any faith in China other than the communist beliefs. There are many voices around the world asking to be heard who live under the oppression of dictatorship, unable to freely express their identities, their religion, their culture. Europe is becoming more and more aware of the urgency to help the Uyghurs population through a forceful support to the Uyghur World Congress, and that is thanks to your tireless efforts. The nomination of the World Uyghur Congress for the Nobel Peace Prize is fully deserved, certainly for the remarkable high ground that you have achieved, for your courage over the years, for your wisdom, and for your perseverance in fighting for freedom, democracy, and justice. You will be also recognition for the suffering and the abuses you are enduring as much as a sign of justice for the millions of your nationals which must attain justice and freedom. At the same time, the nomination for the Nobel Prize would be an immediate and strong political message to the Chinese regime and to all autocrats and dictators who, in the world, are bloody-handed because of their violence, corruption, and arrogance. Have a good working session and all the best wishes and all my greetings to all of you and to the World Uyghur Congress. Thank you.
Greetings to my friends at the World Uyghur Congress. Thank you so much for the work you've done for 20 years to bring attention to the plight of the Uyghurs as they're being persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. It's unimaginable that people could be put in forced labor camps and face forced sterilization and forced abortions and be forced to eat meat that violates their religion. So many things that are being done to Uyghurs, and the world's attention needs to be drawn to this issue. So many people are suffering every single day, and there's so many things in the world that are getting so much more attention. We need to call attention to what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. I commit as the chairman, co-chairman of the Uyghur caucus here in the United States Congress that I'll do everything in my power to try and bring more attention to this issue so we can break through all the noise that exists in our world with so many different crises taking place, that people must recognize that this persecution is taking place. Thank you again for everything you do. Rahmet.
世界ウイグル会議20周年イベントにご参加の皆様、私は日本の国会議員の古谷圭司です。私は日本ウイグル議員連盟会長、また中国の人権侵害を究明し行動する議員連盟会長を務めています。ドルクメイサ議長をはじめ関係者の皆様のこれまでのご尽力、心から敬意を表します。昨年10月30日、日本で11年ぶりに国際ウイグルフォーラムを国会の議員会館国際会議室において開催をして、延べ30人以上の国会議員、世界各国の要人をはじめ過去最大規模のウイグル会議を開会しました。その11年前の世界ウイグル会議においても、当時の中国大使から脅迫まがいの抗議を受けましたが、私たちは中国大使に抗議を仕返し、一切の妥協することなく開催をいたしました。2022年2月には国会においてウイグルにおける深刻な人権状況に対する国会決議を行いました。そして私たちは頻繁に中国による人権侵害に関する会議を開催をして有識者などから深刻な実情を伺っています。中国の常軌を逸した動きを絶対に許してはなりません。そのために自由、民主主義、基本的人権、法の支配などの共通の価値観を持つ世界の国々が連携をさらに強化させていくことが重要です。今後とも皆様と緊密に連携していくことをお約束を申し上げてご挨拶とさせていただきます。
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Congratulations on your 20th anniversary. For the past 2 decades, the World Uyghur Congress has advanced justice and human rights and the rule of law for all. You have helped countries around the world, including Canada, learn about the unfolding genocide towards the Uyghur people. Dokun, I want to thank you personally for your tireless advocacy and self-sacrifice. To the Congress and community, I want to thank you for your courage and strength. It's because you speak truth to power that people like me are able to stand beside you. We, in our core, know that a better tomorrow is possible. You inspire us all. Stay strong.
Köptün köp rahmet bizning dunyodagi har qaysi davlatlardagi parlament a'zolarining so'zlari uchun. We thank all our parliamentarian friends from around the world for their inspiring words. Ben programını davamlaştırıştım burun. Bizden Uygur mihmanlarımız hap olmayken şu bizden teneffüsümüz bir saatten keyin var. Teneffüste talağa çıkıp kafelerden istanlar. Kirip çıkıp kumaylı çünkü bizden çetellik mihmanlar jirahyelerden gelip cim oturuvatıdı. Biz devlet kurumuz davatımız muşinçilik işini kılamızda devlet kuramayız. Rahmet. Next, I would like to invite the executive director of Uyghur Human Rights Project and also the executive chairman of the World Uyghur Congress's executive committee, Mr. Umar Kanat, to introduce our next panel.
Assalamu alaikum, aziz vatandaşlar. Anlamadım ki bu vakit hayırlı olsun. Bugün hazır size en kızıkan tema üstüde sohbet oldu. Belki bu yığında katlaşmayan, nurgınlayan insanlarımız bu hazır. Muşu verilen, muşu sohbetini naiti intizarlıkla sakladılar. Şunun kalmanlar, benim diyendek, Zümrüt ayını diyendek, talağı tolu çıkmay, dikkat bile bu panelini anlaşılığını sizlerden talep ediyorum. Rahmet sizlerge. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah, this panel is something that is very much related to what Ambassador said, that, you know, when you are married, you don't need to divorce. The Uyghur World Uyghur Congress, in its 20 years of advocacy activity, we try to educate international community about what's happening in our homeland, who are the Uyghurs, and about how the Chinese government is violating our human rights, and since 2017, how the Chinese government is pursuing a genocidal policy in our region. At the same time, we let them know during our advocacy work that our cause is not only a human rights cause. Our cause is a national cause. And they also getting us to know by learning about suffering and about our history, about our culture. They started to understand our situation. So, as Ambassador also mentioned, Chinese communists took over the control of our land in 1949. And since then, they have been trying to eliminate the people, Uyghur people, because this land belonged to Uyghurs. And international community also knows what's happening now. So we decided, the World Uyghur Congress, to start a project to know what is the legal situation of East Turkestan, and according to international law, whether it is a colonized country. Of course, it is a colonized country, but we have to analyze it to prove it according to international law. And now, because of the Chinese government's genocidal policy, a government which wants a ethnic group to be eliminated, so I think automatically we also have now the right to a statehood, to protect our people. There is no state. Chinese state has been trying to eliminate us, to erase our culture, to erase our language and our their identity. So now our discussion is about this, and we, Uyghur Human Rights Project and also World Youth Congress started a project almost 2 years ago. And Dr. Michael Fonwald, an international professor of international law, has been leading this project, and he now Mehmet Tohti, the director of the Uyghur Human Rights Advocacy in Parliament in Canada, will ask questions, and now I will ask Dr. Fonwald to the podium, invite Dr. Fonwald to the podium, and Hazır hiç nima anlayamay o'ltamanlar yana quloqqa tiqadigan nima shuni ilmlar tarjimasini anlamlar bugungi.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to express my thanks for being invited here to speak to you. Can you hear me, or is it?
Yes, this is here. Very good.
But also, I want to express, as a number of people have done yesterday and today, my real admiration for the way in which the World Uyghur Congress, all the affiliated organizations, all the Uyghurs and the leadership has been able to really build the movement over so many years. I mean, I've known Erkin Aktekin, İkkinci, for more than half my life, I think. And we have worked together. But at a time when there was not sufficient attention being given back by the international community for what is happening to you. Sadly, it has had to happen in part due to the extreme measures that the PRC has taken under Xi Jinping to bring to light. It is the Chinese that in part have brought to light the plight of the Uyghur people and the other peoples of Eastern Turkestan. But I really admire the way that you have in these last 20 years managed to draw serious international attention to what is going on and preparing yourself for the next phase of your struggle. I have some PowerPoint. I just want to make sure that it is available. It is very few illustrations, but on a couple of key points I'd like to illustrate, because sometimes visual is more effective than only spoken language. Do we have it?
You have a different,
Sorry for this little delay. I sent it last night.
Thanks.
So, as you've just heard from the introduction, we have been working, and that is my colleague Mick Boltis and myself, we have been working for the past few years doing research, thank you, doing research on who ruled Eastern Turkestan over the last 2,000 years and how, but also who ruled what we call the Han homeland, or the place where the Chinese, as we call them today, but actually where the Han lived and have lived for thousands of years. Some people call that China proper, other people call it the Central Plains. We've chosen to call it the Han homeland to avoid misunderstandings on what it is that we really are talking about. In other words, when we talk about the Han homeland, it does not imply a political entity, a state, but simply the territory. When we talk about that region, we use Han homeland. When we talk about a political entity, a Han state, we will use the name of that state, like the Han dynasty, although it coincides with the word Han, or the Tang dynasty, or the Ming Great State, etc. Because that is how they were known at the time. They were not known as China. We do this also, in other words, we only use the word China when we talk about the Republic of China from 1912 or the People's Republic of China. Because it was in 1912 that China was created, the state that we know as China. And we also do it so that we don't confuse the present state, China, with historical Han states or empires that existed in the past, because they're not the same. They're distinct, they're different in terms of territory, they're different in terms of governance, they're different in many different ways that are quite essential to an analysis of the status of Eastern Turkestan. Also, we don't use China and Chinese when we talk about the historical period before 1912, because it may give the impression that there has been a continuity between earlier Han states and the PRC, which again is not true. So, in fact, one of the reasons why we kind of use this term Han homeland is because there's so many periods in history where there is no Han state. And so how do you then describe that region? You have to use some territorial expression, some territorial description. And really, and I'll come back to this later, the use of China and Chinese, the way that many of us have been using it indiscriminately to describe so many different things, that mean so many different things to people, has led to a confusion that makes it very difficult for us to understand the historical analysis, in particular to places like East Turkestan, Tibet, Southern Mongolia, Taiwan, other places that are not part of what we call the Han homeland. Also, just before I continue, I talk about Eastern Turkestan rather than East Turkestan when I'm talking about the territory, not the political entity East Turkestan, or as the Chinese call it, Xinjiang. Again, just so that I'm clear that I'm talking either about the region where for most of the history there wasn't one polity, but many different polities, many different khanats or states within that territory of Eastern Turkestan. So I make that distinction, and I sometimes talk also about East Turkestani people, meaning the Uyghurs and other peoples, Kazakhs and other people in Eastern Turkestan. Just for clarity so that you understand how I use these terms. And today our research has been very careful and we haven't finished it yet. So today I'm only going to want to speak about those areas, those conclusions that we've reached that I feel confident about, because Mick and I have researched them in great detail, some of it already peer-reviewed, some of it's yet to be peer-reviewed. So, coming back to my point. The picture that emerges if we look at how Eastern Turkestan was ruled and by who, and how the Han homeland was ruled and by who and how, historically, allows us to state with confidence, and that's really the finding that I want to present to you today, or at least a portion of it, is that East Turkestan today is under Chinese colonial rule. But specifically, the same kind of colonial rule that France exercised in Algeria or in Vietnam, that the Netherlands, my country, exercised in Indonesia, that the US exercised in the Philippines. In other words, the colonialism of the type that existed and was widespread in the early 20th century, the late 19th and early 20th century. In other words, I'm not talking about neocolonialism, I'm not talking about internal colonialism, which are terms that are very often used nowadays as 21st century forms of colonialism. I'm talking actually about a kind of classical colonialism, in which you can talk about East Turkestan as a colony of China. I'm talking, in other words, about the colonialism that was firmly outlawed after the Second World War, and even more absolutely made illegal from the 1960s and 1970s by measures taken by the United Nations. And so the Uyghurs and other peoples of Eastern Turkestan today are the victims of that type of colonialism. The Chinese colonialism they've been subjected to, technically since 1912. The two findings that lead to this conclusion are the first, that Chinese rule in Eastern Turkestan has been colonial in nature, the way in which East Turkestan is ruled, from the moment that Eastern Turkestan came under the nominal sovereignty of the Republic of China in 1912. And secondly, that the rule was foreign from the outset, and that it remains foreign today. And it is the second point that I want to talk about today. In other words, that the rule of Eastern Turkestan today, but actually since 1912, is foreign Chinese rule. But I also will say some things about why this is not generally known or recognized internationally. And I know that many of you, when you're doing advocacy, you find a lot of obstacles, a lot of assumptions that you have to overcome before you can really make people understand what is happening in Eastern Turkestan and why you're in the situation you're in today, and why it is that you claim that you want a changed political situation. So one of the reasons, and I will come back to some others, that is not generally known is that the PRC's rule in Eastern Turkestan is foreign because that is not one of the reasons why it's not generally understood that it's foreign is, of course, because Beijing, the PRC, loudly proclaims that it is not. It loudly proclaims that Eastern Turkestan is simply an integral part of China and has been for the last 2,000 years, since the Han Dynasty, to be specific. You know that this is not the case. But most people outside of this room have some assumption that there is some truth to this. That somehow Eastern Turkestan was part of China. When exactly or how they may disagree on, or they may not know, but there is a sentiment that somehow this is true and that your position is somewhat extreme. So I address the fact that this is not true, that Eastern Turkestan was not a part of China since 2,000 years, since the Han Dynasty, at an earlier conference that I was kindly invited to. But I will, without lingering on that point, I just want to show you an overview of who, apart from obviously local Eastern Turkestani rulers, ruled or exercised controls over parts of Eastern Turkestan and sometimes over all of Eastern Turkestan until 1912, just to refresh your memory. Now, where is it that I push? I suppose, it's not. It's, okay, this one. So what this actually shows is that over the centuries, on the left is the timeline, that over the centuries, and on the left is the timeline, up there is the northern part of Eastern Turkestan, and on the right is the southern part of Eastern Turkestan. Over the centuries, multiple different foreign powers controlled some or all of Eastern Turkestan. Some directly, some indirectly, some with strong rule, some with weak rule. Their origin was mostly, if you see their names, mostly Inner Asian. Inner Asian powers, whether they were Turkic, Mongol, many different kinds of Khanats, Tibetan at one point, Han, Manchu, but hardly Han. None of these empires that ruled over parts of Eastern Turkestan had staying power in the long term. I mean, some ruled for a long time and some short, but they all came and went. And this is not unique to Eastern Turkestan. This is the history of most nations in the world. Now, let's look at just the Han states that exercised authority, a degree of controlling authority over Eastern Turkestan over the last 2,000 years. They are represented by those two yellow portions there. So this timeline shows, firstly, that before 1912, which is this point here, two different Han states controlled part or all of the region for about a total of 270 years out of 2000. And obviously, very long time ago. More than 1,000 years ago. Both of those empires, the Han and the Tang, came and went. Just like all the other powers you've seen before. So if we take the information from just these two very simple and not precise charts, because it's difficult to make it very precise when you do it visually. If we take this information from these two charts, it's clear that the notion that Eastern Turkestan should have been part of a Han state, which the PRC calls China or Chinese, or part of so-called Chinese territory since ancient times, is simply absurd. But not only is it false, it is also misleading, because to claim that Eastern Turkestan has been a part of China or Chinese territory since ancient times actually suggests the continuous existence of China or of a Han state since ancient times. The two are, it's not possible to say it's been part of China since ancient times and at the same time not insist that China existed since ancient times. But this is not the case, because despite what most of our history books say, and most of what the media says, China has not existed since ancient times. And that's very significant. Now, I'm not denying the existence of the Han homeland since ancient times, in other words, this territory and the people that live there. I'm not denying that there has been Han culture since ancient times. There has been, and of course it's changed over that period, but there has been a rich Han culture. What I am saying is that there was no continuous Han political entity or Han state since ancient times, and certainly not a state China in this long period of time. Because China came into existence with the foundation of the Republic of China. It was imagined, it was constructed in 1911, 1912. Before that, it did not exist. There had been Han states before, but they were not called China. They did not resemble today's China, and they were completely different states, and they were known by different names. So Beijing's projection of today's China into history, in fact today's China with the PRC's claimed borders into history, as if it had always existed, is a false representation of history. Now, some other countries also do that. They create a national history that is projected way back. But what is harmful is when you do that in order to derive rights to other people's territory by using this kind of false historical narrative, invented, imagined historical narrative. It's one thing to imagine it, to give pride to your people, etc. It's a completely different thing to imagine it and to use it to take other people's territory. Now, most importantly, when Sun Yat-sen founded the Republic of China in 1912, there had not been a Han state for over 250 years. not since the Ming Dynasty had been defeated, conquered, and extinguished by the Manchu Qing Great State. So if you look at this little figure, the yellow is again when there was a Han state ruling the Han homeland. I'm not talking about ruling East Turkestan, but the Han homeland. The blue is when it was a non-Han state, an inner Asian state. In the first case, part of the Han homeland was ruled by the Jurchen, an inner Asian people. Later, they called themselves the Manchus. And the southern part was ruled by Han. Then you get, of course, the conquest by the Mongol Empire. And then the Ming Dynasty, a Chinese dynasty, a Han dynasty, and then that is conquered. The Han homeland is conquered by the Manchu, an inner Asian people, an inner Asian empire, and this is not an ethnic issue that I'm talking about. It's not because they're Manchu and not Han. It is because it was an inner Asian empire that conquered the Han homeland, that conquered the Ming. So it is a completely different structure of rule. Its origin is in Asia, and it moves and conquers the Han homeland. Now, just the fact that the Han homeland was such an important part of the Manchu Empire does not make the Manchu Empire Han or Chinese. It is like saying, you know, how the British used to call India the crown, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, because it was the most important part of the empire, economically, politically, and otherwise, and territorially. The Han homeland was the crown in the jewel of the Manchu Empire. But India, the fact that India was the crown in the jewel of the British Empire didn't make the British Empire Indian. In the same way, this did not make the Manchu Empire Han or Chinese. So again, this is just to point out that there is no, the notion that there's a continuous Han state, which again in Chinese language today is Chinese state, existing prior to 1912 is simply not true. There's one other misconception that needs to be addressed, and that is the notion that the Republic of China was simply when it was created, it simply constituted a regime change in quote-unquote China. In other words, that it was a continuation of the Qing Empire in a republican form. I think that is a general assumption that many people have. And that comes from the notion that there's a continuous existence of China, and there's simply regime changes. One emperor from another, and the PRC today says one ethnic group rules and then another ethnic group rules. This is a fabricated way of rewriting history, but in effect, the creation of the Republic of China was the creation of a new state. And to make this clear, let me just bring it back to 1911, when, as you know, there were rebellions, revolts in many provinces in the Qing Empire, but specifically in the Han provinces, that were rallying around the cry to expel the Manchu, the foreign barbarian rulers, and restore the Han. By October of 1911, their leaders set up a revolutionary government, and almost all Han provinces declared their independence from the Qing Great State, which was the official name for the Qing Empire, the Qing Great State. A month later, Mongolia declared its independence. And this was very significant, not only because Mongolia covered a huge territory, a huge part of the Qing Empire, but also because the Mongols played a very important role in the expansion of the Qing, in its very establishment, but also in the expansion of the Qing Empire and also of its rule. They had a very important role in ruling the empire, particularly the military aspect of it. The Dalai Lama of Tibet had already ended his relationship with the Manchu emperor 2 years earlier, and by 1911 the Tibetans were throwing out, expelling all Qing officials that were still there and the Qing armies that were still in Tibet. So another very sizable chunk of the Qing Empire, if you like, was exiting. On the 1st of January 1912, the Han provinces that had declared their independence from the Qing Empire, which was almost all Han provinces with the exception of one, joined forces and proclaimed the establishment of the Republic of China, bringing the breakup of the empire, bringing the breakup of the great Qing state to a point of no return. The emperor was forced to abdicate, and the great Qing state ceased to exist. It was extinguished. What happened in what I just described when the Qing Empire came to an end was the result of a process that we call dismemberment, breakup. And the Republic of China was just one of several states that emerged from that dismemberment, from that breakup. So the Republic of China didn't simply take over and continue to rule the territory of the Qing Great State, or perhaps under a different name. It was an independent state that emerged from that empire. And this is, I think, the part that is the most difficult for many people to grasp, because when they look at a map of the PRC today, it looks a little bit like the Qing Empire. Although, of course, there's this huge part of the Mongolian Empire, and there's Taiwan, which is not today recognized internationally as part of it. But what we fail to recognize is that that large map that we see today as the PRC was created by the PRC by its own military expansion, the way that the ambassador of Taiwan described today. In other words, that was not the Republic of China. Another way to understand this and to make this perhaps clear to people who don't quite follow your reasoning is to make them think for a moment of the breakup of the Soviet Union. We commonly refer to it as the breakup of the Soviet Union. We talk, the Soviet Union ceased to exist because it was dismembered. Distinct parts of the Soviet Union each declared their independence from the Soviet Union. And what many people forget is that the Soviet Union ultimately broke up because the Russian Federation, Russia, declared independence from the Soviet Union, the same way as the Han provinces declared independence from the great Qing state. So obviously they were not a continuation of the previous state, just as Russia, the Russian Federation, is not a continuation of the Soviet Union any more than Kazakhstan is, or than Georgia is, or than the Baltic states are. Now, did the founders of the Republic of China want to make all of the Qing territory theirs? Yes, they did. It was certainly their goal and intention, and they very audaciously declared in their founding documents that all of these territories were actually the Republic of China. But did they actually achieve that they were part of the Republic of China? No. Why do I say audaciously? Because they did so when the Republic of China, when it was created, had no presence, no control over non-Han inhabited territories like Mongolia, Tibet, and Eastern Turkestan. Those were, in other words, that claim and the maps that were shown of the Republic of China were at that time purely aspirational. And in fact, both Mongolia and Tibet, as many of you knew, rejected the overtures of the President of the Republic of China to join the Republic. You don't ask someone to join a republic if they're already part of it. They asked them to join, both very firmly and repeatedly rejected this request. So, and no control was established, not in 1912, not any time after that during the existence of the Republic of China. So those claims remained aspirational. Now, in Eastern Turkestan, the situation was a little different from Mongolia and from Tibet, because it was not the people of East Turkestan, the East Turkestani, but a former Qing official, a Han general by the name of Yang Zhenzin, who successfully grabbed power in Eastern Turkestan with the help of a sizable army. And a few months later, he pledged allegiance to the Republic of China. And the Republic of China then appointed him governor of Xinjiang. For the next 30 years, Han military dictators, one after the other, who overthrew each other, in other words, they weren't simply appointed by the central government, they took power, and then the central government accepted them simply because that was the only way they could claim some authority or some nominal authority over Eastern Turkestan. These Han military dictators ruled Xinjiang with an iron fist, repressed resistance, and ruled Eastern Turkestan independently of the Republic of China, or independently of the government of the Republic of China. In fact, if the rulers of Eastern Turkestan were close to anyone, it was to the Soviet Union at that time. So much so that there's a whole period during that time that Eastern Turkestan could best be described as a satellite of the Soviet Union, not of China. In the same time, in the same period, and we're talking 1912 to 1949, East Turkestani independence movement twice declared an independent East Turkestan Republic. The first, based in Kashgar, was declared for the whole of Eastern Turkestan, but controlled only a portion of it, and it was crushed very quickly. It was established in 1933 and was crushed early on. The Second Republic was established in 1944, as you all know very well. Its government also declared the Republic to cover all of Eastern Turkestan. And for the next 5 years, it ruled and controlled northern Eastern Turkestan from Hulya until the armies of the People's Republic of China, or the PLA, seized the territory and also the rest of Eastern Turkestan in 1949-1950. All this history you know. Now, it makes it, what I just described makes it difficult to describe, to label the status of Eastern Turkestan during those years. And the best we can really do for most of that period is to say that the Republic of China had nominal sovereignty over that territory, but that East Turkestan was ruled independently of it. Now, what we also should realize is that many other territories that had been part of the Qing Empire were not being ruled by the ROC. And I'm not just talking about Tibet and Mongolia now, and Eastern Turkestan, but also about Manchuria, which became an independent country, of course a puppet state of Japan, but nevertheless not under control of the ROC. Taiwan was, as we already heard, a colony of Japan, and was therefore already since 1895 not under control, and certainly since 1912 not under control of the ROC of China. And so we're actually talking about the Republic of China only consisting of the Han homeland, essentially, with a little bit here and a little bit there in addition. And even within the Han homeland, the government had little control over many parts of the Han homeland. So it is strange and preposterous, really, for much of the rest of the world to have recognized the Republic of China in its aspiration at least less than half of it. But one of the reasons why this was the case, why this was done by many in the international community, was because this was a very different era compared to when the Soviet Union broke up, for example. This was at the height of the colonial period. This is when foreign powers were gathering territory, where taking someone else's territory by force was not only not forbidden, but it was to some extent permissible. And so the point that I'm making is that the period was different, the way in which it was looked at was different, and so the big powers were essentially, most powers that were involved in this part of Asia were simply looking after their own interests, and if it was in their interests, recognize that the ROC had some nominal authority or other over Eastern Turkestan, then they would do it because their interests were being served. Their interests were served in having a weak Republic of China, so that they could do in whatever territory that republic claimed what they wanted to do, as imperial powers, as colonial powers. That was the reality. But once again, just to get us back into the main line of the argument, the notion that the Republic of China was a continuation of the great Qing state, or that it somehow inherited sovereignty from it, over the Han homeland or over any of the other areas in Inner Asia, is simply false. It's a misrepresentation. So let me just recap to get to the last point. And this is, I don't want you to look at this map in terms of the information zone. I just took it from the internet, but it was the only one I could find until we create a better map that shows the distinction between the areas that the Republic of China actually controlled, which is the dark yellow, and all the other areas that before had been part of the Qing Empire in one way or another, or where they had some relationship, strong relationship with authority. And so you can see that more than half of that area was simply not the Republic of China. So what do we know so far? One, that the notion that Eastern Turkestan was part of China or of a Han state since ancient times is false. Two, that there was no continuous Han state all through history, as is being claimed by the PRC, leading up to the Republic of China. That the Qing Empire was not a Han state, that there was no Han state in the 2.5 centuries leading up to the foundation of the Republic of China. Again, no continuity. The Qing Empire broke up, it dismembered, and the Republic of China was simply one of several states that was in the process of emerging from it, emerged from it, and that contrary to what is commonly assumed, the Republic of China did not simply take over and continue to rule the same territory as if it was a regime change. Considering all of this, the question is obvious, and I challenge you to this question: how is China not foreign in Eastern Turkestan when you follow this reasoning? How was China in 1912, when it was created, not foreign? Of course it is, and of course it was. So why is it not clear to everyone? First, because the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China have rewritten history. Secondly, for decades, until recently, and it still happens, scholars and others use the word China and Chinese irrespective of the true meanings of those words, and that creates a confusion, partly intentional, partly non-intentional, which makes it very difficult for us to understand these 6 points or to see them. Third, we are conditioned to think from the perspective of independent states today. And so, of course, the seizure of an independent state by its neighbor, like Russia seizing the Ukraine, it's very clear to us that this is aggression, that this is foreign, that Russia is a foreign state. But because Eastern Turkestan was not an independent state recognized by all other states in 1911, that creates confusion in our minds. But it doesn't make those that seized power at the time in 1911, 1912, less foreign for that reason. Nor does the fact that those were colonial times make it less foreign. Also, the fact that Eastern Turkestan was under foreign rule has been hidden because, as I said earlier, many recognized the ROC in the boundaries that it had claimed, which has created it. And finally, because China today preempts any thought and discussion on that issue by playing the victim. They were the victims of colonialism and imperialism, and therefore they cannot be imperialist or colonialist or foreign in relation to Eastern Turkestan. This is a non-logical argument. It makes no sense. You can be both. Believe me, it happens all the time. But it puts us on the defensive, and it makes it very difficult to actually enter into a discussion on that. So let me come to the present now. As you know, the government of the Republic of China, the original government was replaced by a Kuomintang government, then that was replaced by a Chinese Communist Party government, all by the use of, partly by the use of force, or at least civil wars and so the question is, can China today still be considered foreign? After, since 1912, having some type of nominal authority, and since 1949, actually having control over Eastern Turkestan. And has anything changed since 1912? And the answer to both these questions is yes. In other words, can China still be considered foreign power in relation to Eastern Turkestan, and therefore the colonialism being colonialism of a foreign power over Eastern Turkestan? Yes, because time alone does not change the fact of foreigners. Just think of the 250 years or more of colonial Portuguese colonialism in East Timor or in Angola, etc. Those hundreds of years haven't made the Portuguese less foreign, didn't give the colonized people any less right to be decolonized. So time doesn't change that quality of being foreign. What has changed though, and that's why the second question is also a yes, there has been a change, and that is that since the Second World War, and in particular 1960s, 70s, and now I quote, alien subjugation, domination, and exploitation has become prohibited under international law, and the remedy for colonialism of this type under international law is decolonization. It is the only remedy that is allowed. Decolonization through an exercise of self-determination in which the people that have been colonized have the choice as to what political status they wish, whether it is independent statehood, autonomy, integration with another state. Theirs is the choice, And so this is why it is important to understand that there is a distinction between simply colonial style of rule and understanding that East Turkestan is actually a colony in the formal sense, that it is a colony established by force by a foreign power. Thank you. So I'm sorry I took so long, I didn't intend to.
Thank you, Michael, for undertaking such a painstaking work over the years and enlighten not only the audience here at the same time, all the listeners around the world. I would like to just make it simple for some of the audience and others to understand better. So, foreign power is the one who is colonizing the East Turkestan, which is People's Republic of China. So, victim is the people of East Turkestan, Uyghurs. And there is a legal remedy for the colonization. It is a decolonization or a process for the people who are being colonized to declare their own legal status or political determination. And also, in my understanding from the study, and by the way, this is the first ever legal study on the legal status of East Turkestan right now, and so more to come. So colonization is a direct result of continuous form of occupation of foreign power, including a subjugation of people on the land and conquering the land that belongs to native people and exploiting the natural resources and enforcing the foreign culture, including the foreign language and the foreign values and all others, through enforced settlement of foreign people to the occupied land and the enforced displacement of original owner of the land through all sorts of atrocity crimes, including genocide, whole or part of extermination, and all forms of torture, rape, and looting the natural resources and all others. And as a result, the natives are criminalized and marginalized, dehumanized, and degraded. And so in that sense, it seems to me that the East Turkestan is the textbook example of today's colonization. And you mentioned about the legal remedy. And if you can expand it a little bit more, and from the UN level, what kind of legal remedy available for the people of East Turkestan to end this brutal form of colonization and to decide their own political future?
Thank you. Thank you for the clear description. The things you summed up are fairly usual, typical characteristics or consequences of colonialism, as we experienced them in the past in many parts of the world. Remedy decolonization through self-determination, as we just explained. What are the paths, if you like, to it? That's a difficult question. it is difficult on the one hand because somehow we, the international community, have exempted China and some other countries from the necessity to decolonize in the way that other powers have been made to decolonize, have been forced to decolonize. And so that our mentality, the political mentality of us and our leaders and governments has to change to the realization that we are dealing with colonial situation and that therefore there are consequences to it. There are consequences to the PRC because under international law it has the obligation to decolonize and it has the obligation to enable or at least not prevent the exercise of self-determination by the people of Eastern Turkestan, of East Turkestan. But also there is an obligation among our governments, obligation among the states, the international community, to enable that right to self-determination from being exercised. In other words, our governments cannot sit idly and let the situation remain as it is. So I think it is time to, and I hope that our book will contribute once it is finished, that it can be used as a tool to educate and convince opinion makers and decision makers that the situation is one of colonialism, that it is time to take the consequences of that and address it. But it remains a political process. So there are some legal avenues, clearly, and it would be good to investigate and pursue those because they strengthen your political argument. But ultimately, of course, countries have to have the political will to push China to do what it has to do.
Thank you. Just a little more clarification for our audience. Under the leadership of World Legal Congress, this is the first ever legal study by an independent expert just to determine the current legal status of East Turkestan. And with this legal study, we laid the foundation. What is the legal status of East Turkestan today? And the second discussion is, what is the remedy, legal remedy? What is the solution? And so the one legal expert in Canada, David Matas, recently completed one legal study, right to statehood. Legal process for East Turkestan to become an independent state. That's the title of the study. And he studied 5 precedents around the world and how those former colonies became independent state by using the available international legal remedies. And especially one point Michael mentioned is extremely important, which is the UN resolution passed on December 14th, 1960, titled UN Resolution on Guaranteeing Independence for Colonized People and Nations. It is 1514. That is the serial number. And so after that resolution, more than 80 countries, former colonies, became independent. And so this is one legal pathway that they're waiting for us to explore more and to present more legal options or understanding for our people to exercise their rights. And this is the beginning. For that reason, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Michael, because over the years and the limited resources he has, and he worked with his team to complete the study, and it will be published very soon. And just, I can only one question if there's any from the audience.
Thank you very much. My question is more about your research, and it is, what is the basis of the judgment that the Han's of the Han dynasty and the Tang dynasty, since the Turkic stills record the Tang dynasty as Tabash, it's in the history, and which is currently recognized as a Han state, which, while there are many evidence even in the current Chinese history records showing that the rulers of the Tang dynasty speaks Turkish, lived in the tents, and were nomadic, has many nomadic heritage and many other evidences showing that they are non-Hans. Plus, there are also periods that the Tang dynasty was paying tribute to the Uyghur states and conquered by the Tibet dynasty as well. There were 28 Tang princes were given to the Uyghur and the Turkic dynasties as tribute, and also many Tang princes were given to the Tibet dynasty as well. What is the theoretical basis of this Han ethnic group or Han state? Well, the simplified Chinese language was launched since 1986 to unify many languages into one, which is Putonghua. If the Chinese character was a basis of this Han's judgment, then the Japanese and the Korean people were also using the Chinese character throughout the history, well ethnically distinct from the Han people today. Thank you very much.
It's a very good. It's a very good question. I mean, I could joke about it and just say I'm being generous to the Han, the Chinese. Your point is very well taken, and there's academic discussion about what actually is Han and where it originates, and and I think what this shows more than anything is that you look at this part of Asia, and it is very difficult to actually identify any pure type of ethnicity or race or culture or etc. So yes, there is some arbitrariness to it, but there are some arguments that can be made that that dynasty from which the word actually derived, Han, had characteristics of a Han state with the structure and the way of governance and some of the basic principles. But you're right, it's open to discussion, and you could put some different color on that first yellow that would show there is some doubt to it. But we also can't make all of them Turkic. That would look wrong.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, there are many things to be said, and as of today, our community will start this discussion. And I would like to remind them that there are many words. We are only talking about one, which is occupation, and there are many words in English in a similar manner: inhalation and foreign subjugation, foreign dominance, annexation, conquer, conquest. There are a lot of. And today, from the legal point of view, and our friend Michael just summarized the legal status of East Turkestan, which is the colonization. Continuation of occupation leads to colonization. Colonization means occupying the land, colonizing the owners, and looting the natural resources and displacing the owner of the land, and encouraging the settlement or foreign alien people to the land. So there are a lot of meanings, and as of today, this is going to be a hot topic. So we will discuss more, and I would like to thank Michael for this excellent work and the patience for our audience. And this discussion, the panel will end here, and we will talk more. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Van Valt and also to Mr. Mehmet Tohti. Köptün köp rahmet Doktor Vanzat efendimge muşu dokladni şunçilik inçik şekilde düşendirgünge hem bizning Mehmet Doktor efendimge moderatörlük payını köptün köp rahmet. Endi tövende bir qancha nusxani eskartib qo'yay dedim. Hozir endi tanaffusga chiqamiz 15 minut. Andan keyin qaytib kelamiz. Tanaffusga chiqishdan burun nurg'ulg'an mehmonlar somkasini programma hammaligi bajba narsani olmabdi. Shunga bizning Jurat akamiz oldida saqlayotdi somkalardan. Olmaganlar somkalarni ilib olsa. Undan sirt bu so'zlaydiganlar so'zlagan chog'da qisqacha so'zlasak, ya'ni savol so'ragan chog'da bayonot e'lon qilmay qisqachalam savollar so'rasak eng yaxshi bo'ladi. Chunki vaqtimiz bek qisqa, hozir kechikib qoldik. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. We will now have a 15-minute break, after which we'll resume the session. So I would again once welcome you to the hall for a coffee break. I would like to call Senator Antoinette Gull, Geneviève, Lopsa, Tenzin, Dolgunka, Rushenede, Erkinka, please come. We will take a photo for in light of China, Xi Jinping's visit to France. ayol senator Antoinette Gül, onundan set Ruşen Abbas Hanım, Campaign for Uyghurs direktörü ve Marco Respenti efendim, Bitter Winter magazine'nin İtalya'daki magazine'nin direktörü. So now I would like to introduce our next speakers and our next panel, which is going to be about securing Europe's long-term economic future, the role of addressing the Uyghur genocide. And we have our wonderful speakers already lined up on stage. The panel will be moderated by Mr. Nuri Turkel, who is the Commissioner at the United States Commission for Interreligious Freedom, and Sir Ian Duncan Smith, who is a key member of Parliament in the UK, who has played a vital role in addressing the Uyghur genocide, but also ensuring that the UK government and Parliament recognizes this as genocide. We also have Ms. Antoinette Gül, who is the French senator, very outspoken ally in the French Senate as well. We next have Ms. Ruşen Abbas, who is the executive director of Campaign for Uyghurs, as well as Mr. Marco Respenti, director of Bitter Winter magazine. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Hope you had a good night's sleep. We're going to have an interesting discussion, something not usually a part of the human rights conversation, but we try to have our experts on the stage with us to discuss what is the implication of the potential dependency on China on the economic front and its connection to the modern-day slavery that the Uyghur people have been subjected to. The United States and the European partners use the term de-risking to reduce dependency, but it is already showing a sign of turning into a smokescreen. This is truly alarming. For democracies that woke up to the dangers of economic dependency on authoritarian dictators after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it must be clear that this was a cakewalk compared to China. Only European economies were deeply affected, and it was confined mainly to energy. In contrast, China's grip on supply chain is global. Every country is dependent on its China supply chains across every corner of its economy, and this dependence affects the life and death of millions of citizens around the world. Think of a PPE, the personal protective equipment, COVID, and the fact that as of 2020, China accounted for 86% of the raw materials for key antibiotics globally. Lower of access to China's market has resulted in capture of big businesses as lobbyists for the appeasement of the CCP. Case in point, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that has been implemented nearly since summer 2022. CCP leverages seemingly innocuous legal and legitimate engagements with other societies to enrich its shadow efforts into the systems and institutions of others while staying outside the reach and purview of most governments. In Europe, already talk of de-risking from dependence on China seem to be fading. Will it turn out to be complete smoke screen? That is something that we'll be discussing today. You have the bios of our speakers, and Zumrat, I already gave you the brief introduction. Just last week, the Irish journalist Finbar Birmingham of South China Morning Post compiled a long list of activities and the actions took place in Europe that includes German federal prosecutor announcing that 3 German nationals have been arrested on strong suspicion of spying for Chinese intelligence services. UK also charged 2 men under the Official Secrets of Act over alleged spying for the Chinese. And EU Commission opened formal proceeding against TikTok under the Digital Services Act, assessing whether TikTok Lite launch would expose European children to risk of addiction, anxiety, depression, eating disorder, and low attention span. And just the last couple of days, early last week, TikTok suspended the Lite services after that announcement. And EU officials also launched dramatic down raids against Chinese equipment surveillance companies, New Tech premises in Warsaw and Rotterdam, for looking for foreign subsidies. German government also arrested far-right EU lawmakers Abe at Jingo on suspicion of spying for China. So this is a quite long list of activities just took place in 1 week on the eve of Xi Jinping's visit to Europe that starts tomorrow. So I'm going to ask our panelists to give us your perspective. Why all of a sudden European Union, European communities have taken such a bold step? Is this something new? Is this something that has been boiling on? Or is this something that is a convergence with the United States position that has been advocated by the current administration since the beginning of the administration? If you can start with Sir Ian Nankin-Smith would be great.
Thank you. Shall I use that?
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I've been saying for some considerable time now that we are in a more dangerous situation than we've been at any time now since the end of the Cold War. And the big difference between the Cold War, as many of us can remember it, and today, is that nobody here or anywhere that I've ever met can ever tell me of anything they ever bought that had the label on it saying made in the Soviet Union. And that's critical because they and their economy, they mounted a huge defense position, but on an economy that never rose above the size of New York states. So in the end, it was the economy that finally crashed the Soviet Union as a threat. And they were outspent by the Europeans through NATO and America, and the Canadians, of course. All the NATO members then outspent what the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies could do. Today, we are in a very different position. China has succeeded in becoming now the second largest economy in the world. And more than that, far from the Soviet Union, China has now inserted itself into the very workings of every single free world country, to such an extent that we now fear losing that link with China because we are not prepared for what comes next. And if you can think about it now, almost everything that you buy, from plastic pots to telephones and microchips, etc., more often than not are made in China. But there is a reluctance now that there is a concern about that of companies to declare where they're made. I'm having a battle with Amazon at the moment, one-man battle, but you're all welcome to join me. I said it's not possible for anybody buying a product that wishes not to buy something made in China to identify the product that they're buying was actually made in China. Not possible. Amazon denied that and sent me 8 different links. They didn't think, of course, that we would go check all the links, and they were nothing to do with what we were talking about at all. So I'm now due to see their senior guys, and I'm going to continue this, so feel free to all go and ask Amazon the same question: how is it we can find out where a product was made? Because the real reason is, and this touches on it now, the problem we've got across the free world is because so many companies in the free world have locked themselves to Chinese production and Chinese involvement. What has happened now is that they don't want to know about forced or slave labor, because they know very well that many of their supply chains contain elements, if not significant elements, of forced labor, slave labor. And it's not just the Uyghur. You can look at what's happening in Tibet. There are hundreds of thousands of Tibetan men, particularly, who are in factories as well in China producing. Many of those arrested for their Christian beliefs are also transported and are in forced slave labor as well. The biggest group is clearly, obviously, the Uyghur. But the reality is that China does it to everybody that they do not like. And companies we know throughout the free world have turned a blind eye to that. Now, we have legislation in the UK where they're meant to declare their supply chains free of slave labor. They mostly lie about this, as far as I can make out, and the government hasn't done anything about it. And they all say, well, we can't absolutely prove it. But that's not true. There are now companies out there, one of them called Oratane, that using forensic science, having gathered it previously, can tell you not just whether that product came from in the region, they can actually tell you which factory it was made in. So it is wholly feasible to do. They now work for the US government, who are serious about shutting down on slave labor, which I have to say Europe and the UK have not been, but must do now. So if you want to try and change this, number one, we've got to start moving away from China and our addiction to all things Chinese and start pulling back to other areas to invest in, countries that have courts and free justice and also separate from the democracies. There are plenty of them. I've been talking about lots of countries where we have differences. And secondly also, now we're in the stage where so much of what is manufactured using computer-aided manufacture with fewer and much lesser need for huge levels of manpower. There seems no reason in many of the added value areas that we use, these shouldn't be coming back to the developed countries again. We should be bringing a lot of that back because we can certainly do it by investing in it, and no longer do we need that. And if the lesson comes from anywhere, it is the addiction of parts of Europe to Russian oil and gas, where everybody said nothing will ever happen, and then you knew sure as hell it was going to happen, and it happened, which is we've had the cost of living crisis as a result. So we have to be on our guard. It's the little things that eventually bring countries like China down. The moment we start withdrawing business, many middle ground companies are now leaving China, not happy about the way that they get their IPs raided and all the rest of it that goes on. So the question really is, what can we do? The answer is all of us can do it and spread the word. You shouldn't be buying products made in China unless you can absolutely identify that they are clear of slave labor. You must assume the other. And secondly, tell our governments it's time you started having a policy to bring some of that manufacture back to Western countries.
Using your background on the ESG particularly, the environment, social issues and governance, and if you can help us to understand the French government's position and initial reluctance on the recently passed directive banning forced labor, even though it didn't specifically mention East Turkistan, Uyghur region or China, how significant is this and why French government has been reluctant to sign on early on in this important directive?
Okay. So at first, maybe I can introduce myself. I'm Antoinette Gull. I'm French senator. I'm ecologist French senator. I would like to apologize because my English is not fluent at all. It seems to be, but it's not as it seems to be. So that's why I will read some part of my explanation if you don't mind, and I hope I will be as understandable as possible. So at first I would like to say that the word economic dependence on China raised a lot of questions. Of course, so first of all, and you know it better than I do and better than everybody do, it's a question of human rights, modern slavery, and oppression of Uyghur people. The second is the question of environment, which is a very important question. China is one of the biggest polluter in the world, and the economic dependence obliges every country to assume this question of environment. The third one is the question of political interference, which also arises. China is using its cyber surveillance in the European election campaign, you say it. China used as well its cyber surveillance to control French senator, and we learned that last week in Senate audition when we were speaking with the government. So 7 of us have been spied by China, and that cannot be possible in a democracy like France. That's not possible that another country can spy French representatives of population. So that's a real big problem, and of course that will bring with that a question of national security with, of course, dependence on strategic China's technology, and you speak about that with TikTok. But for France, one very big problem of China is that it's terrible economic player. Its strategy of anticipation, of planification, of seeking, of course, monopoly position at all costs, make our economy extremely vulnerable. I give you an example, a recent example with rare earths in France. We know that it's absolutely necessary in all technology. China have organized the monopoly, constantly bringing down all our companies. So now we don't have any companies in this topic, which is strategic, to do our own sovereignty. So it's not the result of chance, it's the result of a methodic, very methodic economic strategy. I go on this topic, or maybe?
We will have a second round.
Yes, okay.
Ask Roshan something very specific. As most of you know, the ongoing Uyghur the forced labor is a key component of the ongoing Uyghur genocide. The United States government responded with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And I know it for a fact that our government has been advocating our allies and partners to join the effort, put in place similar type of legislative mandate to address this modern-day slavery and a genocide, I call it tech genocide. And Roshan, if you could help us to understand the necessity and importance of our European allies and partners to join this endeavor.
Thank you, Nuri. Before I directly answer your question, I'm going to point out a couple important points on the topic that we just discussed, is dependency. The number one is the energy independence for Europe is extremely crucial. When we are speaking about the clean energy, in 2023, 80% of the world solar panels were produced in China. With global production tripling in last 3 years, nearly 30% of today's solar-grade polysilicon and 32% of metallurgical-grade silicon is produced in my homeland in East Turkistan. We are building our new world on the backs of Uyghur slave labor. China owns the monopoly on the solar panel, and the CCP is sucking the life force out of my people so they can export cheap and dirty energy to the rest of the world. So energy independence is critical to the sovereignty of a nation. If Europe remains dependent on the genocidal dictatorship on our energy, then you compromise your future. You compromise your principles. And you also compromise the autonomy to pursue policies that are in line with democratic values. So as Europe strives to strategic autonomy in its energy sector, it's crucial to integrate our core values of human rights and the democracy into our energy policies. If we look at how, above all, what it means to decisively reject energy sources and the production linked to human rights abuses, notably it's linked to the Uyghur genocide, the question is very simple here. How is Europe going to compete with slave labor? It cannot, and it will not be able to. European policymakers seem to think that solar panels made in Uyghur blood by burning coal is somehow clean energy. It's tainted with Uyghur slaves, at the same time compromising its own company's economy. So what's happening as European companies and manufacturers are going out of business because they cannot and they will not use slave labor basically in Europe. So how is it smart when you say smart energy? How will this bring Europe's strategic leverage in energy? So to speak about what we have the UFLPA and the new EU forced labor bill, to truly commit to an ethical supply chain, European policymakers must enforce strict regulations that rigorously monitor imports for human rights violations. The new forced labor regulations is certainly a step to the right direction, but is it enough? No. I don't believe that it's rigid enough, especially to counter China's exploitation of the Uyghur people and the wealth of our homeland. When you compare EU with new forced labor regulations, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSDDD, and the UFLPA, you immediately notice that what's missing in the EU efforts. European governments appear to dismiss the reality of what's happening in East Turkestan, and they remain indifferent to the open-air prison system in my homeland. Also, now it's turned to full-fledged genocide. UFLPA recognized the cold reality of CCP's genocide in our homeland, and the state-imposed forced labor. So it puts the burden of proof on the companies. But the European regulations, basically Europe gives China the benefit of the doubt still, even though the forced labor and the genocide are taking place in the front of our watch. So just to conclude this, the regulations in Europe right now, it says, well, we don't know, let's investigate. There comes to a point where people stop giving Europe the benefit of the doubt, and they finally will say, they knew it all along, they just wanted money. The economy is the issue. And their foolish greed killed their democracy and their economy. So this is the future of our planet and the democracy. So it is an urgent issue of national security. It's our century's greatest moral test. We are all responsible for what happens next. So if we don't speak out now to address this and hold China accountable, then the only voice left to speak will be one of regret.
Marco, you and I talked about this last January when I was in Rome after my testimony at the Senate and Chamber of Deputies, specifically on forced labor. And Italian businesses, specifically in the tomato and cotton industry, have been implicated in the ongoing slavery of the Uyghur people. Can you speak to the challenges in Italian society, businesses and government, why Italian society has not been responding the way that, for example, the United States have responded to the modern-day slavery?
Thank you, Nuri, for giving me the opportunity to comment a little bit about the society and politics of my country, which is sometimes embarrassing, as you were just saying. The short answer to your question is that this is the Italian way. But it's not very nice. Being Italian, I know. Let me just remember, you all know perfectly, but let me just recall you that Italy in March 2018 was the first of the major countries of the world to sign actually a blank check in the hands of the People's Republic of China. You can still find online the text of the Memorandum of Agreement in English, so everyone can read it, and it's still on the official website of the Italian government. And that was basically, if I need to be polite, a shame. It was just, as I said, a blank check saying we will do, what you basically dictate us, and that had that was political, but had a huge repercussion, of course, on the cast of mind, society, the press. I want to commend a report made by an ONG based in Prague, the Czech Republic, Synopsis. They made a report on the pressure of China in the press. I know that quite well since I'm a journalist. And the International Federation of Journalists, of which I'm a proud member, had a parallel report on the pressure on the media, Italian media, during COVID, and the aftermath. There is a cultural, even if not a political correlation between the memorandum of agreement signed by the two governments and the pressure on media and society and people in general. But this, to go to the answer, this accounts for the fact that I think my perception is that my countrymen don't perceive the problem. It's business as usual in a very vulgar way, saying I'm buying cheap stuff and that is enough. Well, I cannot blame what in Italy called the casalinga volgera, that would be translated as to the housewife of a small town Italy. When she goes to the grocery and she finds cheaper products, but that is up to the political level, media, and the conscious people to raise the question, and even to raise the price, even economically. Well, I'm not an economist, I can comment easily, my background is philosophy, I can comment easily on my stuff, which is religious liberty, so I'm not speaking in a very economic, precisely economic way, but I want to put economists a question, to answer your question to me. Can you explain us why it cannot be cheaper to buy healthy products than the reverse? I can understand that in the short way that could be more costly for people, but if we can push little by little dirty energy, not clean energy, and stuff like that, out of business, not buying it, in the medium range, maybe in the long range, that would be, would be bad for, people like China and better for us. We suffered for high prices during the Russian and Ukrainian crisis, and we did it for a purpose. Why cannot we do it for the tomatoes and cotton? Well, I go to normal shops, and I like to be controversial sometimes. I go to the shops and I buy blue jeans and I ask, does this come from my friends?
Thank you very much, thank you. The Chinese Supreme Leader recently announced new economic strategy. As you know, the Chinese traditional economic base had been construction and real estate. That has no longer the case. Now they've been squeezing consumer products. They've moved up the value chain, trying to export EV batteries, windmill, solar panels. And Xi Jinping has a new wording for these. He wants to produce new quality productive forces and exporting. And Europe has been somewhat responding, for example, investigating Chinese exports in EV, train solar panels, and wind turbine. What is the UK government's position on these concerns in response to China's new approach to global economy?
Well, my government at the moment, and I think all would-be governments in the UK, are really not engaged in this area at all. The fact is, the Chinese economy right now is in some problems. It used to have to say that it had to grow at about at least 5% to stand still. They've gerrymandered many of their figures, as we know. They've got a huge real estate crisis going on, which they're not now writing down the amounts, but it's very important, it's very big. But Xi is able to make this statement about change of direction because he's looked at us and realized UK and Europe are already an open market for him. And so what he announced out as well is he said that all battery companies in China, and you know battery companies in China dominate the market for these electric cars and everything else, he now has said they should turn themselves into car companies. So they're now all busy changing. Why? Because as we set ourselves these deadlines for net zero, the problem when you set yourself an absolute deadline, it becomes the most important thing in life, and you don't question how you get there, which is why most countries in Europe and in the developed countries around the world are simply not wanting to face up to what the cost of that really is, of getting there. So you have a country in China's case that is now building coal-fired power stations at a rate you cannot possibly believe. They're going to produce all of these things that we use to make ourselves feel better, and by achieving these targets, they're going to use the dirtiest means to do that, and we buy them because we can transfer our carbon targets over to China. And we know China doesn't care a damn because they're not going to obey any of the restrictions at all. So that's fortuitous for most countries in Europe and the UK. So the way that we are reluctant to do anything about this is because we know now that we are about to be swamped by China-made electric vehicles in vast numbers. So Europe's beginning to wake up to that, the European Union. The UK has still got to face up to the fact that this is happening already as they look at it. And the reality for us is we're going to have to really think about carefully what gives in this, because if we don't think that we should be doing net zero on the basis of how we can achieve it in a way that doesn't damage everybody else and at the same time achieves a balanced outcome for that, not swamped by foreign cars. So the UK has been very slow, very uneasy about making statements. I have questioned my own government the other day, very clearly had a row with them about the fact that they seem to have had an unspoken policy of not sanctioning anybody in China at all. But it is quite spectacular the scale to which this is now going to become dominant in the next 4 to 5 years. It's the way that China will shift, and will shift at our expense, and we will become even more dependent than we were before. And all the point about rare earth minerals, on top of that, things like lithium and etc., they've dominated all the market in this, so all the batteries are there, and the cars are ready to go, but we still haven't made our minds up as to whether or not we need to get to net zero as fast as this, or whether we need to have a care about slave labor, about dominance in the marketplace, about burning fossil fuels at a rate which is inconceivable in any other country, and about damaging everybody else's livelihoods and economies. That is the key question which most government ministers, and I think around the world, are very reluctant to directly engage. But we first of all have to engage and ask that question: how far are you prepared to go just to get to 2050? Are you prepared to trash everything else en route to that, or do you care a little bit about the human rights of those who are being put into slave labor and about the state of the environment being generated now in China? And until we do that, we're lying to the public.
Just an anecdote, Ian and I share something. We're both sanctioned by China. If you've done enough to get Putin's attention, I've been sanctioned by Putin as well.
I'm sanctioned by everybody, I think.
So why do I bring this question? It's important because there's a documented evidence of Uyghur forced labor in these 3 key industries. Sometimes we call it renewable energy sector. So I think it presents an opportunity for the European leadership to attach the Uyghur genocide, Uyghur forced labor practices as part of the efforts to push back, prevent Europe becoming a dumping ground for those products. If I could go to you, Senator Gül, Xi Jinping is arriving to Paris tomorrow.
Yes.
He specifically picked Paris, and Belgrade, and Budapest. Why France? Why no other European capitals? What is the significance of his visit starting with Paris? If you can share with us the key priorities for the President Macron's administration and what French society and government is trying to accomplish.
Thank you for the question. You said that Italy, you were embarrassed by the choice of Italy sometimes, and French people are embarrassed from choice to French government sometimes. So, in 2 days, in some days, 2 or 3 days, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, will receive the President Xi Jinping in France, and they will together walk on the childhood path of Emmanuel Macron, because he will bring him into his natal village, city, village. A lot of us in France are not proud of it at all. And I understand your anger, because I think that each of you are angry with this situation. I would like to say to you that last week, during the question to the government, because each week Parliament has 2 hours to ask questions directly to the minister and to the government, and I take the time I had last Wednesday to ask the Minister of Foreign Affairs about this official visit. Why? Because it would be unacceptable for French people that if this visit is a black check given to China to continue the Uyghur genocide. That was not possible to accept that. So I asked the minister. I have to tell you that the response was quite disappointing, but because the response didn't even mention the human rights and forced labor, just the need to meet the great world power that is China, just to answer your question. So, I think that the French government has to decide, maybe it's not ready now, but he has to decide what is its position with China. Because one day we can speak about Uyghur and defend the human rights, and the day after we just invite the president of China to work in the French campaign. That's not possible. We have to choose, or is the defense of human rights, which is a central value for France, or a complacency based on economic interests. Or I can say maybe not economic interest, but economic dependence. And we can speak about that because this economic dependence is not healthy for every country. So we just lose twice, one on human rights and once on economic activity. So I think that the complexity of geopolitical situation today works in China's favor. I explain what I want to say. You should know that in France we are very focused on, for 2.5 years on the Ukrainian conflict, and you have, I think, heard that President Macron mentions the possibility of mobilizing French people to fight in Ukraine. You heard that. So it's only to show you the importance that this war has in France and the outcome of this war at the gate of Europe. Added to this, there is the tragedy between Israel and Gaza. And I think that our president doesn't want to open another front. I can say can't afford to open another front now. Diplomatically, it needs peaceful relationship with China, and perhaps even is counting on China, like last year, to play mediator with Russia. I think that that's a very important point which can explain a little bit what Macron is doing now and why this visit will happen here. But yes, not the French opinion, not all the French opinion will be. Okay, thank you. Oh, bye.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Very It will be 2 years since the UFLPA has been enforced next month. We haven't been able to stop the Uyghur forced labor, even with that strong legislative initiative. And if I can go to you, Roshan, to share your perspective on the challenges and possibly loopholes that this law has. And what do we do about it to make it even more stronger, enforceable law? If you can speak to that, would be great.
We were so happy when we saw the UFLPA being passed and signed by the president, and it became a law. And we thought that this is going to make a huge difference. But unfortunately, we didn't see that much differences on the companies continuously importing from China, especially the supply chains, using the Uyghur slaves for their products. So basically, with that, we, all of us, are not just being complicit with China's genocide, but those companies and the countries are making all of us are the enablers of this genocide when we use their products that are produced by the forced labor. The Chinese government is not only conducting genocide against the Uyghurs, but making this genocide a profitable venture for China. So why we have the law started to implement almost 2 years ago, and still we see millions and billions of products being shipped. There are a few challenges. One is we are not seeing the real forced implementation of the UFLPA. And also, we are seeing a lot of pushback from the companies who wants to continuously making profit of the Uyghur slaves' blood, sweat, and the tears. And as well as there is a loophole in the legislation, in the law called de minimis rule. If any shipments less than $800, then it's not subject to this this law. Well, we are seeing millions of small shipments, like Shane and Timu and the others. So there is a bill actually passed in the House currently, and we are trying hard to get the Senate to put on the vote. It's the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act to address those loopholes. Another thing is lack of education among the consumers, lack of raising awareness, because the Uyghur cause, Uyghur genocide, is sort of top to bottom case in the United States. Majority of the people who are in the administration or at the Hill or policymakers or people who are on this research, they know what's happening with the details. But if you go talk to general public, many of them, as high as like 90% of the American general public, they don't know what's going on to our people. And also when you see Hollywood celebrities, NBA superstars, and the CEO of the companies, and the famous talk show hosts, usually so vocal against any kind of social injustice, but then where are they when forced sterilization, forced abortions, and the forced labor, child abduction, and everything you name it on the count of the genocide and the crimes against humanity is happening today. So, of course, economy. The governments and the corporations act like, such as, you know, the future of the world needs or depending on the genocide to survive. And we are done with this nonsense. And we need to keep raising awareness, keep speaking and educating people. That's why it's so important for everyone, politicians like yourselves and anybody, actually, because this is a humanity issue. There is no neutrality when it comes to genocide. There's right side or wrong side, and we all want to be on the right side of the history. So will we uphold the vow, never again, is the real actions to follow, or are we going to witness the repeat of the Munich Pact when Holocaust was happening during the World War II, in the name of the sake of the economy? The countries try to claim the ignorance afterward. Also, they knew what was happening when they were continuously doing business with Nazi Germany at that time in the sake of economy. But this is information era. And none of the leaders, politicians, or companies, they have no excuse because they all know what's happening.
Just recently, the Elie Wiesel Foundation, World Uyghur Congress, and Uyghur Human Rights Project jointly organized a 2-day-long conference disrupting the Uyghur genocide. And the first night we had this exhibition, full wall of tomato posters, specifically targeting the consumers in Italy. What kind of role that consumers in Italy, specifically in just one sector, can play to force the Italian government to do something legislatively to address this serious concern?
Not buying blood red tomatoes coming from that. But there is the glass is also half filled. I mentioned the Memorandum of Agreement of March 2018. Last year, December, the new government repealed the Memorandum of Agreement, so Italy is the first country stepping out of the Belt and Road Initiative. I have no proofs of what I'm saying, but I think that some kind of rising awareness among the people, voters, electors, consumers, pushed at least the government, the new government, to move in that direction. Of course, it's not enough, but from this stage, I want to thank the World Uyghur Congress and your leadership, because first time I did an interview with an Uyghur leader more than 10 years ago with Ms. Rabia Kader, I was teased because Italian people could not even pronounce Uyghur. Now someone, thanks to you, the WUC and your leadership, at least in a country like mine, which is so tied to the genocidal monster, something is moving in the right direction. So to go directly to your question, consumers can do a lot. They did probably the first step pushing the new government in the right direction. Again, it's not enough, but it's something.
Thank you very much. We're getting close to the end of our discussion, so if I could go around and ask each and every one of you, just take a minute or two to share your final reflections after listening to each other today.
Yeah, I just want to raise the point that was touched on earlier on, which is that none of our governments have worked, well, that's not correct, none of them, but America has now spotted this and is beginning to take action, but the rest of us, our governments, are very slow. The fact is we are already at war, but we are losing. And the reason we're losing it is because we're not prepared to admit that there is a war going on. China is at the axis, rather the center of an axis of what I call totalitarian states. That includes now North Korea, Russia, Iran, and Syria has just joined that group. China sits there overseeing all of this. Russia's invasion of Ukraine wouldn't have happened if China had said to them, you will not get any support from us, we do not want you to do it. So their invasion of the Ukraine, they've now helped them out by buying all their oil. They've also helped them out because they've broached a new deal with North Korea to supply artillery and weapons. Now, who tells me here that China isn't selling their stuff to Russia or giving it to Russia, but via North Korea, because North Korea won't be able to produce at the scale they have. Also, what was really required by Russia was a diversion of the United States away from supporting Ukraine. So what do? Iran mounts, through Hamas, a full-scale attack on Israel, knowing full well what would happen next. Israel could not take that lying down, and that's where we have this huge fight going on in and around Israel and in the Gaza Strip. And all the other organizations of terror are now stepping up. Hezbollah are there as well. What effect has that had? That has had the effect in Congress of making sure that at least the Republicans have delayed and never wanted to vote the money going to Ukraine because they said, well, our focus has to be on Israel, which is where it always has been. But they've now denied to vote that money until the last moment. Who has benefited from that? Russia has benefited from that. And so you can see the hand of China everywhere now. So it's not just industrial, because they use the industrial to support their own machinations. Iran is absolutely locked tight to them, and we are even not doing enough about the IRGC, who are in our countries, fermenting lots of this nonsense in the universities and all of the misunderstood belief about these terrorist organizations. So whatever else we do, and the Uyghur are right at the heart of how they do this, because they use them, use you, to be able to go out and make product that ties the West to them. We are at war, and our governments need to face up to it. And we're being undermined by the power of China because we don't want to deny ourselves those cheaper products that we get from China. And we now must call out our governments and say, shame on you, because this is the wrong policy.
I would like to tell you then that before the end of May, we will vote in Senate a law which is a proposed law. That means that it's a law which is done by senator or deputy, and the law is to reduce the environmental impact of textile industry, introducing a new definition, which is the commercial practice of fast fashion, and it's a law which will concern specifically Shein and Temu. So I tell it to you to tell that we are going, it's already adopted by the National Assembly, and now we have to vote it at Senate Assembly. And if it's voted at the end of the month, we can tax for environmental impacts each product from Shein and Temu, because they are fast fashion, and we have to give the definition of fast fashion, but we will do that during next month. So just to say that it's always an actuality for us to defend your right, and to take the problem by each way we can. It can be environmental, it can be social, and we try to make the cause go further. I would like to say a citation of a French poet, which is Victor Hugo. Everybody here knows him, and he said, "There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And because it's French, I say, okay, I will speak about him. So I think that time has come now, and I think that you can rely on France, or a lot of French deputies and senators to defend your rights and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. So with China's active genocide against the Uyghurs right now, we all know China's war on humanity is blatant. It's a war on religion, on ethnicity and culture. It's a war on women, war on children, and also it's a war on freedom and democracy. We all know what China is doing in Tibet, and how democracy in Hong Kong just crumbled in front of the entire world's eyes. And we all know what happens when we continue to appease a dictator like Putin with Russia's invasion to Ukraine. So now it reflects all of us, this affects all of us, and the world that we are leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren. So I'm going to
Well, first of all, I'm going to emphasize the importance of looking at this, not just the Uyghur issue, Tibetan issue, Hong Kong issue, just a simple human rights issue. We need to look at this as the future of this world. And it's so important to see this. And it's the sovereignty of Europe, sovereignty of Africa, Central Asia, Southeast Asia. It's the future of the world is at stake. So I want to finish with my favorite quote from human rights lawyer from Canada, David Matus. Quote, unless if we defend today's victims, we face the risk of becoming tomorrow's victims. Thank you.
Just a very quick remark. I totally agree with the fact that we are already fighting the war, but my fear is that we started losing it already. And I have a name for that, is a permanent capitulation in front of a giant genocidal monster. It's just like the 1938 infamous Munich Pact done every single day. And this is staggering. No one is saying almost nothing. Second remark is that I give you my very small intellectual contribution on this tragedy, which is I'm trying, and I ask the help of like-minded people to advance the case of the UN Convention of Genocide to include cultural genocide in its text. It is not there. There are reasons. I'm trying to write articles, and I'm writing to write a book on the subject. Until cultural genocide doesn't become something you can nail to, China will escape and cannot be held accountable. That, of course, include the Uyghur crisis or genocide, Tibetans, Mongolians, and so on and so forth. There is a physical side of the genocide, but there is also a cultural side of the genocide. That is a little bit less apparent, evident in the eyes of many. If we don't include that, China and other regimes of that caste will always escape. Thank you.
U.S. Undersecretary for Homeland Security Rob Summers always said, forced labor is a cancer in our values. I'd like you to remember every time when you do shopping. It's not just, as Rishan said, it's not about today, it's about future. It's about what kind of future that we want for our children and next generation. So, in conclusion, I recommend something related to what been discussed. There's a terrific essay in Foreign Affairs written by former Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger and former chairman of the CCP Select Committee Representative Mike Gallagher on the so-called U.S.-China competition. People say we manage a competition. Competition is to win. And I wholeheartedly agree with Sir Ian that we are in a war. And thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our terrific panel.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Hammasiga köptün köp rahmet. Endi 45 minutluk üçlük tamak çıkımız. Vaktini bize kısalttık çünkü program belki yaptık. Şuna iştirak bolsak yana cıfrak teneffüsünü vaktini erişalayız. Şuna tamak birinci kavatta. Now we will break for lunch, 45-minute lunch because we're behind schedule. It's on the first floor. Thank you. Guten Appetit.